This bike is a 125 two-stroke. A lot of people would say it's underpowered, not enough bike. But the truth is, they just don't know the right way to ride small displacement two-strokes. You have to ride these bikes like you're trying to blow them up. Seriously. Today, I'm going to explain the real reason these bikes need to be ridden with the throttle wide open. I'm also going to share why, when you learn how to ride small displacement two-strokes properly, you become a better rider on any bike. If you ride a 4-stroke or a big bore 2-stroke instead, don't click away just yet. I'm going to share a lot of information in this video about how dirt bike engines work and give super valuable riding tips that will help you out no matter what bike you're on. Let's get into it. When you first hop on a 125 two-stroke and crack the throttle, you're likely going to be a bit confused. People always say how aggressive and scary two-strokes are, but the 125 just kind of bogs when you twist the throttle. They truly do feel quite powerless on the low end. They don't really have much lugability, and at first glance, it makes sense why they get deemed underpowered by a lot of people. The problem is, most small displacement two-strokes, like the 125, have an extremely narrow power band. This means that you have to be in a precise RPM range for the thing to actually produce its optimal power. This is in direct contrast to 4-stroke dirt bikes, which have a much more linear power delivery. Hop on a 250F motocross bike, and you'll notice consistent power from the second you crack the throttle, the whole way up through to the top of the gear. Shift to the next gear, and you experience very little to no bog. This makes 4-stroke race bikes very useful tools on the track and the trails. Predictable power allows you to tractor yourself out of sticky situations even if you're not in the optimal gear. You also don't have to rely on feathering the clutch as much. That sounds pretty awesome, right? Yeah, sure it is. Until you find yourself in a situation where you actually need to have really good clutch control and gear selection skills. The truth is, if you only learn how to ride on 4-strokes, there's a high chance you never learned how to use these techniques properly. So yeah, of course, if you hop on a 125 two-stroke, you're going to be saying, what the man, this thing is lame. But let me share something with you. Once you learn how to properly ride a 125, you get to experience one of the best feelings known to man, screaming the absolute out of a two-stroke. I'm not kidding, it's actually one of the best feelings you could experience. But before we crack the code on these two-strokes, if you're enjoying this style of video, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to reach 10,000 subscribers. It's free and it really helps me out. So hit that button below and join the Soup Moto crew today. So let's figure these things out. How do they actually make power, and how are you supposed to ride them? Small displacement two-strokes are quite interesting engines. If you haven't watched my video on engine sizes yet, check that out in the top right or down in the description after this video. That'll give you a much deeper understanding about how dirt bike engines make their power. But here's a quick and dirty. Displacement is just the term we use for the amount of space inside the cylinder. On dirt bikes, displacement is measured in cubic centimeters, or cc's. The cylinder is the space where the piston moves up and down to ignite the air-fuel mixture to create combustion. That combustion is converted into power and sent to the wheels. Alright, now that you have a very basic understanding of how the engine works, what makes two-strokes, especially small displacement two-strokes, different? Well, in 4-strokes, a set of valves and camshafts work to pull the air and fuel mixture into the cylinder and push out exhaust. Each of these operations are performed by a single stroke of the piston. Stroke 1 is the intake stroke, where air and fuel get pulled into the cylinder. Stroke 2 is the compression stroke, where the valves are closed and the piston moves up to compress this mixture. Stroke 3 is the power stroke, which is where the mixture is ignited and forces the piston back down. Stroke 4 is the exhaust stroke, where the exhaust valves are open, and as the piston goes back up, it pushes the exhaust out of the cylinder. Since this operation is spaced out over 4 separate strokes, and the amount of fuel and air mixture along with compression is precisely calculated, 4 strokes create a very linear and controlled power. Additionally, due to added mechanisms like valves, cams, and often heavier flywheels, 4 strokes have a lot more rotating mass, which sort of acts like a buffer to balance out abrupt changes in power. Unlike 4 strokes, 2-stroke engines cut that power cycle in half, firing every single revolution. On stroke 1 in a two-stroke, the piston moves up and compresses the air-fuel mixture in the combustion chamber. At the same time, it's creating a vacuum below the piston, which pulls fresh air and fuel in. At the top of the stroke, the mixture in the combustion chamber ignites, and the piston is forced back down. This is the second stroke, which is the power stroke. As the piston moves back down, it opens the exhaust port, which allows the burned gases to exit. It also opens the transfer ports, which allow the fresh air and fuel from below to move up into the combustion chamber above the piston. This whole process is called scavenging, pushing out old gases and pulling in fresh mix almost simultaneously. Because this whole process is happening in half the amount of strokes, and it's also mechanically simpler, it leads to a much snappier and punchier delivery than a four-stroke. Like we mentioned before, there's not all that extra rotating mass acting as a buffer to sort of balance things out in a two-stroke. Additionally, the expansion chamber plays a huge role. The expansion chamber is that big fat exhaust pipe that gives two-strokes their iconic look. Why do two-strokes need such a big expansion chamber? Well, it's because the process of scavenging is actually pretty inefficient. The expansion chamber helps fix that problem by using pressure waves to improve how the engine breathes. When the exhaust gases rush out, they create a wave that bounces off the special shape of the pipe and pushes any unburned fuel-air mix back into the cylinder before the piston closes the port. It's pretty interesting, but here's the catch. It only works well at a specific RPM. That's why some two-strokes feel flat down low, then they suddenly hit hard when you get into the power band. But wait a second, what about bigger displacement two-strokes? You can definitely lug those, right? I mean, all those hard enduro guys ride 300 two-strokes, and they're always creeping them at super low RPMs, so why can't you do that on smaller displacement bikes like 85s, 125s, and 150s? That's totally true. Bigger two-strokes like 250s and 300s can be lugged around at low RPMs. They have way more displacement, which means they move a lot more air and fuel with each stroke. That gives them more torque down low, so they don't need to be revved as high to make usable power. On top of that, most of these bikes are tuned for low-end grunt, not high RPM ripping. They often have things like flywheel weights, low pipes, and mellow port timing to smooth out the power. But small two-strokes like 85s, 125s, and even 150s just don't have that luxury. They're built for revs, and they need RPM to stay alive. You can't lug a bike that doesn't have enough torque to pull itself at low RPM. You have to keep it in the power band or it'll fall flat on its face. That being said, if you want to ride tight single track and other technical terrain on a small displacement two-stroke, it can be done comfortably by purchasing the right trim of bike or by adding some smart mods. I'll explain how to do that in a second, but first, let's talk about how to properly rip those motocross spec small displacement two-strokes. These bikes, like the YZ125, KTM 125SX, or TC 125, are built to be ridden hard. They're motocross tuned, meaning their power lives way up in the revs, and they expect you to keep it there. So if you want to ride them properly and not get frustrated or think the bike is underpowered, you need to stay aggressive. First, you need to learn how to carry your momentum. You don't have the luxury of coming to a complete stop and instantly having all your power back when you go to twist the throttle again. So start your braking early, but don't brake too much. Carry that momentum throughout the turns smoothly so that when you crack the throttle on the exit, you're already back in that perfect RPM range, making optimal power. Second, you need to downshift early, and sometimes be in a lower gear than you would usually run on other bikes. These ones can't be lugged at all, so make sure you time your shifts accordingly. Downshift too late and you've dipped below the power band. Too early and you're wasting some speed of that higher gear. These bikes really teach you to dial in your shifting. And lastly, work on feathering your clutch. This means pulling the clutch in just enough to begin grabbing when you feel the bike dipping down too low in the RPMs. This will boost your revs up a little bit, and then you let the clutch out again once the revs are back up to where you want them. This is a skill you develop over time, but it's essential for riding these small displacement two-strokes, and it's also a skill you'll be thankful you have when you hop back on a four-stroke as well, or a big bore two-stroke in the woods. I mean, feathering the clutch and clutch control is just so essential. But these small displacement bikes want to scream, and they reward you when you ride them that way. Done right, it feels like you're absolutely flying, even if you're not going crazy fast. So keep that thing pinned and ride it like you want to blow it up. Now, let's say you don't want to ride your 125 all out. If you do a lot of tight single track or technical off-road riding, you can still have a ton of fun on these small displacement two-strokes. First off, you can just buy one that's more tailored for that style of riding. Yamaha makes the YZ125X, and KTM makes the 125XCW and 150XCW. These bikes are made for woods riding and off-road. They lug a little better and respond well in the lower RPMs. If you have a motocross style 125 or 150, don't fret, because you can change a few parts and have a setup pretty similar to those X, XC, and XCW models pretty easily. By changing the pipe to something like an FMF gnarly or similar low-end focused exhaust, you can shift the power band downward a little bit to get more usable torque in the low to mid RPMs. Adding a flywheel weight helps tame the bike even more, making it less prone to stalling and easier to control in technical terrain. And don't overlook gearing. Going up a few teeth on the rear sprocket will help you pull harder at lower speeds, which is perfect for woods riding or tight corners. Now, of course, these mods won't turn it into a 300, but they'll make a motocross spec 125 or 150 way more versatile and enjoyable off-road. If this helped you understand your two-stroke better, make sure you check out my video on 60 brutal truths every dirt bike rider should know. It's packed with hard-earned lessons, beginner mistakes, and mindset shifts that'll seriously level up your riding, no matter what bike you're on. Oh, and since you made it all the way to the end, I've got a little thank you for you. I'm giving away free Moto stickers to dedicated viewers like you. Just hit the first link in the description and I'll send one your way.